The desert wind carried more than dust through Redemption Creek that October evening. It carried the weight of unspoken promises and the bitter taste of a life not yet lived. Evelyn Harper stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun bleed crimson across the Arizona sky. Her fingers pressed against the cool glass, as if she could push through it and disappear into that vast horizon. Tomorrow, she would marry Marshal Nathan Greeley. The thought sat heavy in her chest like a stone. She turned from the window, her gaze falling on the white dress laid across her bed, a gift from Nathan. Of course, everything was a gift from Nathan these days. The dress, the small house at the edge of town where she taught the local children. Even her position at the school had come through his influence. Each gift another bar in an invisible cage. At 43, Nathan Greeley was the most powerful man in Redemption Creek. A widower for 5 years, he commanded respect through a combination of legal authority and barely concealed brutality. When he'd first approached her 6 months ago, hat in hand and speaking of companionship, Evelyn had been too shocked to properly refuse. No one refused Nathan Greeley. "You need protection in a town like this," he'd said, his gray eyes studying her like a horse he was considering purchasing. "A young woman from back east, all alone. It ain't proper, and it ain't safe." She'd tried to explain that she was quite capable of caring for herself, that her work at the school fulfilled her, that she had no desire to marry, but Nathan had simply smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes, and continued his courtship with the relentless patience of a man who always got what he wanted. The townspeople whispered. Of course, they always whispered. Poor Marshal Greeley, still grieving his Sarah. How fortunate that the pretty schoolteacher had caught his eye. What a fine match they would make, and beneath those whispers, the unspoken truth, better to be the Marshal's wife than his enemy. Evelyn pulled her mother's letter from beneath her pillow, the papers soft from repeated handling, the words blurred as tears threatened, but she knew them by heart anyway. Her mother had written of justice and fairness, of standing for what was right even when the world stood against you. Her mother, who had died 3 years ago in a courtroom back in Pennsylvania, fighting a case everyone said she couldn't win. The judge had dismissed her claims without even listening, and the strain had been too much for her weak heart. Nathan had been visiting from Arizona then, consulting on some legal matter. He'd been in that courtroom. Evelyn remembered his face among the observers, impassive as her mother collapsed. He'd done nothing, said nothing, just watched as they carried her mother away. But now he wanted to carry Evelyn away too, into a life of proper wifely duties and silent dinners and cold beds. She'd seen how he looked at her, not with love or even desire, but with the satisfaction of ownership. She was to be another symbol of his control over Redemption Creek, as much a part of his authority as the star on his chest or the gun on his hip. A knock at the door made her start. "Miss Harper?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice, thin and apologetic. The seamstress had come for final adjustments to the wedding dress. "Just a moment," Evelyn called, hastily wiping her eyes. She opened the door to find the older woman clutching her sewing basket, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, miss, but the marshal insisted I check the hem once more." "Mrs." Whitmore's fingers trembled slightly as she spoke. Everyone's fingers trembled when they spoke of the marshal's wishes. Evelyn stepped aside to let her in. "Of course, we wouldn't want anything to be imperfect tomorrow." The bitterness in her voice made Mrs. Whitmore glance up sharply, but the woman said nothing. In Redemption Creek, everyone had learned the value of selective deafness. As Mrs. Whitmore knelt to check the hem, Evelyn stared at her reflection in the mirror. 24 years old, dark hair that never quite stayed in its pins, eyes that her mother had called stubborn green. She looked like what she was, an outsider trying to fit into a world that would never quite accept her, unless she became Mrs. Nathan Greeley. Then they would accept her the way they accepted a rattlesnake in their midst, with careful distance and wary respect. "There, Mrs." Whitmore said, standing with obvious relief. "Perfect for tomorrow." After the woman left, Evelyn sat on her bed, running her fingers over the dress's smooth fabric. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the saloon down the street, the laughter of men deep in their cups. Tomorrow they would all gather in the church, smiling and nodding as Nathan claimed his prize. The thought was unbearable. Moving with sudden decision, Evelyn pulled her carpet bag from beneath the bed. She packed quickly, methodically. A change of clothes, her mother's letters, the small amount of money she'd managed to save. Her hands shook as she dressed in her plainest dress, a brown wool that would blend with the desert colors. The town was settling into sleep as she slipped from her house. Most of the windows were dark, though light still spilled from the saloon. She kept to the shadows, her bag clutched tight against her chest. The stable boy was nowhere to be seen, probably drunk at the saloon with the others. Good. She knew how to saddle a horse. Her father had insisted she learn, back when the world had seemed full of possibilities instead of traps. She chose a steady mare, murmuring soft apologies as she worked. The horse seemed to sense her urgency, standing still as she fumbled with the buckles in the dark. Outside, a dust storm was building, the wind picking up with increasing violence. Perfect. The storm would cover her tracks, at least for a while. As she led the mare from the stable, Evelyn took one last look at Redemption Creek. Somewhere in that cluster of buildings, Nathan Greeley slept, confident in tomorrow's certainty. Let him wake to find his bride gone. Let him rage. She would be miles away by then, lost in the vast emptiness of the desert. The first drops of rain hit her face as she mounted the mare. Not just dust, then, but a real storm. All the better. She turned the horse south, toward the wildlands where even Nathan's authority couldn't reach. She had no clear destination, only the desperate need to be away, to be free, to be anything other than Marshal Nathan Greeley's wife. Thunder rolled across the desert as she rode into the darkness. Behind her, Redemption Creek slept on, unaware that its schoolteacher had chosen the uncertain dangers of the wasteland over the certain prison of a loveless marriage. The storm swallowed her whole, and Evelyn Harper disappeared into the night, leaving only questions and a white dress that would never be worn. The desert was vast and unforgiving, but it was honest in its cruelty. It would kill you or let you live based on your own strength, not on how well you smiled at Sunday service or kept your husband's house. As the lights of town vanished behind her, Evelyn felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. She rode on through the storm, south toward an uncertain dawn. The mare stumbled, throwing Evelyn hard against the saddle horn. She'd been riding for hours, or was it days? Time had become meaningless in the vast expanse of red rock and scorching sand. Her water had run out yesterday, and the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the world into a shimmering hell of heat mirages and false promises. She'd lost the trail sometime during the second night. In her desperate flight from Redemption Creek, she'd paid little attention to direction, caring only about putting distance between herself and Nathan Greeley. Now, surrounded by towering mesas and endless stretches of desert, she realized the fatal flaw in her escape. The desert didn't care about her freedom. It would kill her just as surely as a loveless marriage, only faster. The mare stumbled again, and this time, Evelyn couldn't keep her seat. She hit the ground hard, sand filling her mouth, stones tearing at her palms. The horse stood trembling nearby, foam flecking its mouth, sides heaving with exhaustion. They would both die here, she realized with dull certainty. Another foolish Eastern woman claimed by the unforgiving West. As darkness fell, she thought she saw light flickering in the distance. Campfire light, wavering like a star fallen to earth. Probably another mirage. She'd seen dozens of them over the past day. Cruel tricks of heat and desperation. But this light persisted, steady against the darkening sky. With the last of her strength, Evelyn pulled herself back onto the mare. "Just a little farther," she whispered, her voice cracked and foreign to her own ears. The horse moved forward with shuffling steps, drawn perhaps by the same desperate hope that pulled at Evelyn. The light grew stronger, resolved into multiple fires. She could smell smoke now. And something else. Coffee and cooking meat. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She tried to call out, but only a rasp emerged. The mare's legs buckled, and Evelyn tumbled into the dust for the final time. Voices, rough male voices, speaking in low tones. Strong hands lifted her, not gentle but not cruel either. Water touched her lips, blessed, cool water. She drank greedily until the hands pulled it away. "Easy there," a voice said. "Too much too fast will kill you sure as the drought." She forced her eyes open. Faces surrounded her, weathered and hard, lit by firelight. These weren't townsmen. Their clothes were dust-covered and patched, guns worn with the ease of long practice. Outlaws. She'd fled from one danger straight into another. Well, a new voice, deeper than the others. "What have we here?" The men parted, and Evelyn found herself looking up at a man who could only be their leader. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. His eyes were the color of winter sky, cold and assessing. This was a man who'd learned to survive by reading people quickly and accurately. "Found her half dead out there. Caleb," one of the men said. "Her and that poor mare both about done for." Caleb Rhodes crouched beside her, those pale eyes studying her with uncomfortable intensity. His gaze took in her torn dress, her soft hands now bloodied and blistered, the remnants of careful grooming that marked her as a town woman. "You're a long way from civilization, miss," he said. His voice carried a trace of education beneath the frontier roughness. Running from something or to something, Evelyn tried to speak, managed only a croak. Someone handed her more water, and she sipped carefully this time. "Please," she finally managed. "I can pay." "With what?" Caleb's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Unless I miss my guess, everything you own is in that carpet bag, and it ain't worth the match to burn it." One of the men had retrieved her bag, was rifling through it with casual disregard. "Couple of dresses, some letters, maybe $20 if we're generous." He pulled out one of her mother's letters, squinting at it in the firelight. "Miss Evelyn Harper. Well, at least we know what to put on the headstone." "Enough, Tom." Caleb's voice carried quiet authority. The man dropped the letter back into the bag. "Miss Harper, is it? You're either very brave or very foolish to be out here alone. Which is it?" She met his gaze, summoning what dignity she could while lying in the dirt. Sometimes there's not much difference between the two. That earned her a real smile, brief but genuine. "True enough." He stood, decision made. "Get her to the supply wagon. Clean water, some food if she can keep it down. Doc, take a look at those hands." An older man with surprisingly gentle fingers tended her wounds while the others went back to their business. The camp, she realized, was larger than she'd first thought. Maybe 20 men, all armed, all wearing the unmistakable air of those who lived outside the law. A temporary settlement tucked into a box canyon, invisible until you were almost on top of it. "You're lucky," the man called Doc said as he wrapped her hands. "Another day out there and the buzzards would have had you. Course, some might say stumbling into Caleb Rhodes's camp ain't exactly lucky." The name hit her like cold water. Caleb Rhodes. Even in Redemption Creek. They'd heard of him. Train robber, killer, the scourge of the territory according to Marshal Greeley. Nathan had sworn to see him hang, had led 3 posses trying to track him down. And now she sat in his camp, drinking his water, depending on his mercy. "I see you recognize the name." Caleb had returned, settling cross-legged nearby with the easy grace of a man comfortable on the ground, which brings us back to my question. What's a proper town lady doing running through the desert alone? Only a few reasons I can think of, and most of them spell trouble for us. She should lie, make up some story about visiting relatives, getting lost. But exhaustion and despair had stripped away her capacity for deception. "I was supposed to marry Marshal Greeley tomorrow. Yesterday. I don't know what day it is anymore." The camp went quiet. Even the fire seemed to dim. Caleb's expression had gone very still, dangerous in its lack of emotion. Nathan Greeley. He said the name like he was tasting poison. You were running from Nathan Greeley? Yes. Why? The question came sharp as a blade. Man like that doesn't let his woman go easy. He'll be hunting you, and that means hunting anyone who helps you. She thought of Nathan's possessive eyes, his casual cruelties, the way he'd orchestrated her life until she had no choices left but the one she'd made. Because marrying him would have been a different kind of death. Slower, maybe, but just as final. Caleb studied her for a long moment. Around them, his men waited, tense and watchful. These were men who survived by being careful, and harboring Marshal Greeley's runaway bride was anything but careful. Finally, Caleb stood. You can stay until you're healed enough to travel. After that, he shrugged. Desert's full of choices. Miss Harper, some harder than others. He walked away, calling orders to set watches, to scout the back trails. Evelyn lay back against the wagon wheel, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her. She'd traded one uncertain future for another. But at least here, in this outlaw camp, she was Evelyn Harper, not Mrs. Greeley, not anyone's possession, just a woman who'd chosen the desert over a cage. As sleep took her, she watched Caleb Rhodes through half-closed eyes. He sat alone by the largest fire, methodically cleaning a rifle. The firelight played across his scarred face, highlighting angles and shadows. A dangerous man. Certainly a wanted man. But there was something else there, too. Something in the careful way he'd questioned her. The consideration he'd shown despite the risk she represented. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new choices. But tonight, for the first time since her mother died, Evelyn Harper felt like she could breathe. Even if that breath tasted of campfire smoke and uncertain futures, it was her own. The desert wind sang through the canyon walls, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack. The sound should have frightened her, but instead, she found it oddly comforting. Wild things calling to wild things, surviving despite the odds. Perhaps she could learn to be wild too. The morning sun crept over the canyon walls, painting the red rocks gold. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of men preparing for another day outside the law. Her hands throbbed beneath Doc's bandages, but the pain was proof she was alive, that yesterday hadn't been some fevered dream. You planning to lie there all day, or you gonna earn your keep? She opened her eyes to find a stocky man with graying whiskers glaring down at her. This was Cookie. She'd learned. The camp's cook and general keeper of order when Caleb was away. What would you have me do? Can you cook? Some. She'd kept house for herself since coming west, though her skills were basic. Then you can help. These boys eat like wolves, and I ain't getting any younger. He jerked his head toward the cook fire. Come on, then. Daylight's wasting. Evelyn struggled to her feet, muscles protesting after days in the saddle and a night on hard ground. Her dress was ruined beyond repair, torn and stained with sweat and sand. She must look like a mad woman, she thought, then almost laughed. Perhaps she was. Sane women didn't run into the desert to escape marriage. Cookie set her to simple tasks, stirring the pot, measuring coffee, slicing the tough bread they'd bartered from Mexican traders. Her bandaged hands made her clumsy, but she persisted. The men watched her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. A woman in camp was unusual. A town woman fleeing Marshal Greeley was unprecedented. You're doing it wrong. She turned to find Caleb Rhodes watching her attempt to slice bacon with her injured hands. He'd been gone since dawn. Scouting, she'd heard someone say. Now he stood close enough that she could smell horse and leather and something distinctly male. I'm managing, she said, though the knife slipped even as she spoke. He reached around her, his chest briefly pressing against her back as he took the knife. Like this, let the blade do the work. His hands guided hers, showing her the proper angle and motion. For a moment, they stood frozen, her body acutely aware of his proximity. Then he stepped back, expression unreadable. You learn quick. I'll give you that. I had to. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Women who don't learn quick in Redemption Creek tend to end up married or dead. and sometimes both. He poured himself coffee, studying her over the tin cup. Doc says your hands will heal clean if you're careful. Question is, what then? You can't stay here forever. Why not? The defiance surprised her as much as him. I can work. I'm learning. I don't eat much. This ain't no life for a woman like you. A woman like me? Heat rose in her cheeks. You mean soft? Useless? Good for nothing, but I mean educated. His quiet words cut through her anger. Gentle-bred. You've got books in that bag of yours, letters written in a fine hand. You're running from something, but you're not running to this. He gestured at the camp. The hard men, the constant readiness for violence. Soon as you heal up, you'll want to move on. Find someplace civilized. Start over. She turned back to the bacon, slicing with renewed determination. Maybe I'm tired of civilized. Civilized is what gave Nathan Greeley the right to claim me like property. Civilized is what killed my mother when she tried to speak truth in a courtroom. The knife moved steadily now, her grip sure despite the bandages. At least out here, the dangers are honest. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Then, Tom, show Miss Harper how to tend the horses. If she's staying, she'll need to know. Tom, the man who'd rifled through her belongings that first night, looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but he nodded, waiting while she finished with breakfast preparations. The horses were kept in a natural corral formed by the canyon walls. 24 animals of varying quality. Some were clearly stolen, brands altered or burned over. Others were wild-caught mustangs, still half-feral despite the ropes. First rule, Tom said, handing her a curry brush. Don't walk behind them unless you fancy getting your head kicked in. Second rule, they can smell fear, show weakness, and they'll walk all over you. It was advice that applied to more than horses, Evelyn realized. She approached a gentle-looking bay mare, speaking softly as her father had taught her years ago. The horse's ears flicked forward, interested. You know your way around horses some, Tom admitted grudgingly. My father bred them, back in Pennsylvania, before he died. Before the debts and the westward journey and all the choices that had led her to this canyon. She spent the morning learning the outlaw's routine, which horses were reliable, which would bite, how to check for stone bruises and saddle sores. Her hands ached, but the work felt good, real. So different from the endless tea parties and social calls that would have filled her days as Mrs. Greeley. At midday, she helped serve the meal, noticing how the men's initial wariness had shifted to cautious acceptance. She was no longer a curiosity, but a working part of the camp, temporary though her position might be. You're fitting in. She hadn't heard Caleb approach. He moved quiet as a shadow when he chose. Is that a problem? Might be. He accepted the plate she offered, their fingers brushing briefly. Men get used to having a woman around. Makes them soft, careless. I'd think you'd have more faith in your men than that. Faith's a luxury I can't afford. But his tone was lighter than his words. You've got grit, Miss Harper. I'll grant you that. Most town women would be crying for their feather beds by now. I never had a feather bed. She surprised herself by smiling. Just a narrow cot and a drafty room, though I'll admit I miss having all my skin in one piece. She held up her bandaged hands. Battle scars, he said. Wear them proud. Means you survived something worth surviving. Their eyes met and held. In the afternoon light, his weren't as cold as she'd first thought. There were depths there, carefully hidden. She wondered what battles had left him scarred, what he'd survived to become the man before her. Rider coming! The lookout's call shattered the moment. The camp transformed instantly. Men reached for weapons, took defensive positions. Caleb was already moving, rifle in hand, calling orders. Evelyn found herself pushed behind the supply wagon. Tom crouched beside her with his gun drawn. But the rider was alone, hands raised to show peaceful intent. One of theirs, she realized, as the tension eased slightly. The man, barely more than a boy, slid from his lathered horse, speaking urgently to Caleb. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read Caleb's expression. Whatever news the rider brought, it wasn't good. His gaze found hers across the camp, and she knew with cold certainty that it concerned her. He strode over, face grim. "Greeley's put a bounty on you. $500 for your return. $1,000 if someone brings you back unmarked." His mouth twisted. Seems he wants his bride intact. $500. More than most men saw in a year. She looked around the camp, at the outlaws who'd taken her in, and wondered how long before one of them decided she was worth more as a bounty than as a camp helper. "I'll leave," she said quickly. "Tonight. I won't bring trouble. You'll stay." The command in his voice brooked no argument. "Try to run now, and you'll be caught within a day. Every bounty hunter and two-bit criminal in the territory will be looking for a woman matching your description." He paused, something almost like concern flickering across his features. "Besides, you try riding with those hands and you'll be crippled permanent." She wanted to argue, to insist she could manage. But he was right. She was trapped as surely as if Nathan had locked her in a cell. "What will you do with me?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities. Caleb Rhodes, the territory's most wanted outlaw, standing protector to Marshal Greeley's runaway bride. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "For now, nothing. You'll stay here. Work like everyone else. Keep your head down." His eyes hardened. "But if it comes to choosing between you and my men, don't mistake my decision. I've kept these boys alive by being careful. One woman, even one with grit, ain't worth their lives." She nodded, throat tight. "I understand. Do you?" He stepped closer, voice dropping. "This ain't no fairy story. Miss Harper, there's no happy ending waiting at the finish. Best you can hope for is to stay breathing long enough to figure out your next move." That night, as she lay in her makeshift bed beneath the wagon, Evelyn stared up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Nathan Greeley was hunting for her, his pride and possession stolen by the desert. Here, she was surrounded by outlaws who might sell her for bounty money. Yet despite it all, she felt more free than she had in months. Her hands hurt, her future was uncertain, but her choices were her own. She'd traded the cage of respectability for the dangerous freedom of the frontier. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, listening to the crackle of campfires and the low murmur of men on the watch, Evelyn Harper began to believe she might actually survive this. More than survive, she might find out who she really was when stripped of society's expectations and protections. The desert had taken everything from her but her life. Now she would see what she could build from that foundation. The storm hit just after sunset, sudden and violent as everything in the desert. The wind came first, screaming through the canyon like a living thing, driving sand that stung exposed skin and turned the air opaque. Then the rain. Not the gentle showers of Pennsylvania, but a deluge that transformed dry washes into raging torrents within minutes. "Get the supplies under cover," Caleb's voice barely carried over the howling wind. "Jake, help me with the horses." Evelyn struggled to secure loose equipment, her healed hands clumsy in the chaos. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the camp in stark, terrifying flashes. Thunder followed immediately, so loud it seemed to shake the canyon walls. "The lean-to's collapsing!" someone shouted. She turned to see their makeshift shelter, built against the canyon wall, sagging under the weight of water and wind. Men scrambled to save what they could, but nature's fury made mockery of their efforts. "Leave it," Caleb commanded. "Get to the caves." Caves! She'd noticed the dark openings in the canyon walls, but hadn't explored them. Now, fighting through wind that tried to throw her off her feet, she followed the others toward those promised shelters. The nearest cave was barely more than a deep overhang, already crowded with men and supplies. She pressed inside, gasping, soaked through despite the short distance. More men pushed in behind her, the space growing cramped and close. "Miss Harper," Caleb appeared at her elbow, water streaming from his hat. "There's another cave further up, smaller but drier. Come on." She followed him back into the storm, trusting his knowledge of the terrain. The path was treacherous, made worse by the water now cascading down the canyon walls. Her boots slipped on wet stone. Caleb's hand caught her arm, steady and sure. The second cave was indeed smaller, really just a hollow in the rock face, but it was deeper than it looked, extending back into darkness. They squeezed inside just as another lightning strike illuminated the canyon in brilliant white. "This'll do," Caleb said, setting down the saddlebags he'd saved. "Storm like this won't last long, but it'll be a miserable wait." They were alone. She realized. The narrow entrance and limited space meant the cave could hold no more than 2 or 3 people comfortably. Water dripped from their clothes, pooling on the sandy floor. "You're shaking." His observation was matter of fact. She was, whether from cold or the aftermath of fear, she couldn't say. Her wet dress clung uncomfortably, the temperature dropping now that the sun had set. Caleb rummaged in the saddlebags, producing a relatively dry blanket. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." She stared at him. What?" "Turn around if you're modest, but hypothermia doesn't care about propriety." He'd already stripped off his own soaked shirt, wringing it out with practical efficiency, face burning despite the cold. Evelyn turned her back. The wet fabric fought her, clinging and tangling. She heard him moving behind her, the sound of more wet cloth hitting stone. This was beyond improper, beyond any situation she could have imagined. Yet he was right. She could already feel her teeth beginning to chatter. The blanket, when she wrapped it around herself, was rough but warm. She clutched it close, acutely aware of her bare shoulders and the man sharing this small space. "You can turn around," he said. "Nothing here that'll scandalize you." He'd wrapped another blanket around his waist, his chest bare in the dim light. The scars she'd glimpsed before were more numerous than she'd realized. A map of violence written on skin, bullet wounds, knife marks, the long pale line of what might have been a saber cut. "The life you've chosen leaves its marks," he said, noticing her stare. "They all look old. Most are." He settled against the cave wall, seemingly unbothered by their proximity. "Been at this game a long time, Miss Harper, longer than I ever intended." The storm raged outside their shelter, but in here the sound was muffled, almost peaceful. She found herself relaxing despite the impropriety of their situation. "How did you end up here?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You're educated. I can hear it when you forget to hide it." His laugh was short and bitter. "Same as you, in a way. Running from a life that didn't fit." He was quiet for a moment. "I wore a badge once. Can you believe that? Deputy sheriff in a town not unlike Redemption Creek." She tried to picture him as a lawman, and found it wasn't as difficult as it should have been. There was something in the way he carried authority, the way his men followed him without question. What happened? Nathan Greeley happened. The name came out like a curse. He was a judge then, circuit riding through the territories. There was a land dispute, local rancher against some Eastern company. The rancher had the right of it, had all the proper papers, but the company had deeper pockets. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face for an instant. The bitterness there ran deeper than his scars. "The rancher's daughter came to me, begging for help. Sweet girl, 16 years old, said her daddy would lose everything if the judge ruled against him." He shook his head. "I tried to do things proper. Gathered evidence, witness statements, presented it all to Judge Greeley." Evelyn pulled the blanket tighter, already knowing this story wouldn't end well. Greeley ruled for the company. The rancher fought back, tried to hold his land by force. Greeley ordered me to evict him. When I refused, he shrugged. "Badge don't mean much when the law itself is corrupt." The rancher died in the eviction. His daughter threw herself in the river rather than face what came after. "And you?" Charged with dereliction of duty and aiding criminals, Greeley saw to that personal. "Would have hanged if I hadn't had friends willing to break me out." He met her eyes. "Been riding the outlaw trail ever since. 8 years now." 8 years. No wonder Nathan had pursued him so relentlessly. A living reminder of his corruption, free in the territory he meant to control. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Don't be. I made my choice, same as you made yours. He shifted, and suddenly the cave seemed smaller, though I'd guess your story's got its own shadows. She found herself telling him about her mother, about the courtroom and Nathan's indifference, about the slow tightening of the trap until marriage seemed the only option. He listened without interrupting, his presence solid and strangely comforting. So, you ran, he said when she finished. Took the desert over the cage. It seemed like the only choice. There's always choices. Most folks just don't like the price of them. His hand moved to his side, unconsciously touching one of the scars. Question is, what choice are you making now? The question hung between them. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, the thunder growing distant. But neither of them moved to leave the cave. I don't know, she admitted. I didn't plan beyond escaping. That's the thing about running. Eventually you got to stop and figure out where you're going. He leaned forward slightly. You could still leave, head to California, maybe, or down to Mexico. Start fresh where nobody knows Nathan Greeley or cares about runaway brides. Is that what you think I should do? I think you should do what keeps you breathing. But his voice had roughened slightly. Though I'll admit, the camp's been different since you arrived. Men work harder when there's someone worth impressing around. Is that what I am? Someone to impress? He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. You're unexpected, Miss Harper, in all the ways that matter. The air in the cave had changed, charged with something that had nothing to do with the storm. She was acutely aware of every breath, every shift of his body, the way the shadows played across his scarred skin. Caleb. He moved then, closing the distance between them in one fluid motion. His hand cupped her face, calloused thumb brushing her cheek. Tell me to stop, he said roughly. Tell me this is wrong. She couldn't, wouldn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her own hand coming up to rest against his chest. His heart beat strong and fast beneath her palm. The kiss was inevitable as the storm itself. His lips were surprisingly gentle, questioning. She answered by pressing closer, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. He made a sound low in his throat, pulling her against him. For a moment, there was nothing but this, the taste of him, the solid warmth of his body, the rightness of being held by someone who asked nothing but what she was willing to give. No ownership, no calculated possession, just two people finding each other in the shelter of stone and storm. Then lightning struck nearby, the thunder immediate and deafening. They broke apart, breathing hard. The storm's passing, he said unnecessarily. Yes. They stared at each other in the dim light. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. Tomorrow, she would still be a runaway with a price on her head. He would still be an outlaw living on borrowed time. But tonight, we should get back, he said finally. The men will be wondering, she nodded, reaching for her still damp dress. They dressed in awkward silence, the spell broken by practical necessity. But as they prepared to leave the cave, Caleb caught her hand. This can't happen again, he said quietly. You understand why? She did. 100 reasons why this was dangerous, foolish, impossible. But she also understood that some moments were worth any price. I understand, she said. They made their way back to the main camp in silence, finding organized chaos as men worked to salvage what the storm had destroyed. No one commented on their absence or their damp clothes. In the outlaw code, some things were better left unspoken. But that night, as Evelyn lay in her salvaged bedroll, she could still feel the warmth of his touch, taste the promise of what could never be. The storm had passed, leaving the desert washed clean. Everything had changed, even if they pretended otherwise. The trouble started with Will Tanner. He'd ridden in 3 days after the storm, claiming to have news from the north that Caleb needed to hear. But his eyes lingered too long on Evelyn as she served the evening meal, and his questions came too casual and too pointed. Strange thing, finding a lady out here, he said, accepting his plate with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Especially one as refined as yourself, Miss. Evelyn kept her expression neutral. The desert makes strangers of us all, Mr. Tanner. Indeed it does. He took a long pull from his flask. Though some strangers are worth more than others. I hear Marshal Greeley's offering quite a sum for his lost bride. The camp went quiet. Caleb, who'd been checking his rifle, looked up slowly. That's so? Just saying what I heard in Agua Caliente. Tanner's smile widened. $1,000 is a lot of money. Could set a man up real nice down in Mexico. Could also get a man killed, Tom said quietly from across the fire. Tanner shrugged. Everything's got a price. Question is whether the reward's worth the risk. Evelyn felt the shift in atmosphere, the way hands moved closer to weapons. She'd become part of this camp over the past weeks, but Tanner was testing loyalties, probing for weakness. Miss Harper's under my protection, Caleb said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that brooked no argument. Anyone has a problem with that can ride out tonight. No problem here, boss. Tanner raised his hands in mock surrender. Just making conversation. But Evelyn saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he watched Caleb watch her. The seed of suspicion had been planted. That night, unable to sleep, she found Caleb on watch at the canyon mouth. Tanner's going to be trouble, she said without preamble. Already is. He didn't look at her, scanning the darkness beyond their camp. Question is how much and when. I should leave. This bounty, it's putting everyone at risk. You leave now, and Tanner follows. He's not the kind to let $1,000 walk away. He finally turned to her. Besides, where would you go? It was the question that haunted her. Weeks in the camp had shown her she could survive, could work, could earn her place. But it had also shown her how small her world had become. Every town would have wanted posters now. Every stranger could be a bounty hunter. Maybe that's not my choice to make anymore, she said quietly. His jaw tightened. It's always your choice. Don't let anyone tell you different. They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. Since the night in the cave, they'd been careful, maintaining distance, but the connection remained, a pull neither could quite deny. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound made her shiver despite the warm night. Get some sleep, Caleb said. Tomorrow we're moving camp. But tomorrow brought betrayal before dawn. Evelyn woke to rough hands grabbing her. Tanner's whiskey breath hot on her face. Easy now, miss, we're going for a ride. She tried to scream, but his hand covered her mouth. He dragged her from her bedroll, her struggles futile against his greater strength. The camp was quiet, too quiet. Where was the night watch? Then she saw him, young Danny, barely 18, lying too still by the dying fire. Blood pooled beneath his head. Shame about the boy, Tanner said conversationally. But he wouldn't see sense about splitting the reward. He'd gotten her halfway to the horses when Caleb emerged from the shadows like vengeance itself. No warning, no words, just violence, swift and brutal. Tanner went down hard, releasing Evelyn as he fell. The fight was vicious. Tanner was bigger, but Caleb fought with cold precision. They rolled in the dirt, knives flashing. Evelyn scrambled for Tanner's dropped gun. Hands shaking, Tanner got on top, knife descending toward Caleb's throat. Without thinking, Evelyn brought the gun butt down hard on Tanner's skull. He collapsed, unconscious or dead. She didn't care which. Caleb shoved the body aside. Breathing hard, blood ran from a cut on his cheek. You hurt? Danny. I know. His face was stone. Get the medical supplies. Danny was alive, but barely. Doc worked over him while the rest of the camp gathered, faces grim in the pre-dawn light. Tanner groaned, starting to stir. Several men reached for their guns. No. Caleb's voice cut through the anger. He rides out. Now. No water, no weapons. The desert can have him. He killed Danny, Jake started. Danny's not dead yet, and we're not murderers. Caleb hauled Tanner to his feet. You've got one chance. We'll take it and run. Show your face again and I'll kill you myself. Tanner spat blood. This ain't over. Roads. That girl's worth too much." Caleb's fist cut off whatever else he might have said. They stripped Tanner of weapons and supplies, pointed him toward the desert, and watched until he disappeared into the rising sun. "He'll be back," Tom said. "Or he'll bring others. Then we'll be ready." Caleb turned to the assembled men. "Anyone else thinking about that bounty? Now's the time to say so." Silence met his challenge. These men had ridden with him through worse than this. A woman, even one with a price on her head, wouldn't break that loyalty. "Good. Pack up. We move in an hour." The new camp was deeper in the mountains, harder to reach but easier to defend. They traveled hard for 3 days. Danny slung over a horse, delirious with fever. Evelyn tended him best she could, but infection had set in. On the 4th night, with Danny burning up despite their efforts, she made a decision. "There's a mission," she said to Caleb. "San Felipe, 2 days south. The sisters there. They have medicines, proper supplies. It's too risky. Greeley will have men watching. Danny will die without help." She met his eyes steadily. "I won't have his blood on my conscience. It's not your fault, isn't it? Tanner came for me. The bounty, the danger. It's all because of me." She touched his arm. "Please, Caleb, let me do this." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "We go together." Small group, moving fast. They reached the mission at sunset 2 days later. Caleb, Evelyn, Doc, and Danny, strapped to a travois. The sisters took Danny without questions, their face kind beneath white wimples. "We should go," Caleb said, watching the gates nervously. "Not yet." Sister Catherine, the elderly nun who'd greeted them, studied Evelyn with knowing eyes. "You have the look of someone carrying heavy burdens. Child, perhaps you'd like to pray?" Evelyn found herself in the small chapel, candles flickering in the growing darkness. She hadn't prayed since her mother's death, but words came anyway. For Danny, for the men who'd protected her, for Caleb, who'd saved her in more ways than one. When she emerged, Caleb was talking quietly with Sister Catherine. The nun pressed something into his hand before turning to Evelyn. "Your young friend will recover, God willing. But you, child, your journey is far from over." She smiled sadly. "The man hunting you grows desperate. He's hired professionals now, men without conscience. Be careful." As they prepared to leave, Evelyn realized what Sister Catherine had given Caleb, a simple gold ring, for when you need it. The nun had said. The ride back was quiet, each lost in thought. Danny would live, but the close call had shaken everyone, and Sister Catherine's warning echoed ominously. That night, as they camped under stars, Caleb sat beside her. "Tanner won't be the last," he said quietly. "This bounty, it's going to keep drawing trouble. I know. We could run, head south to Mexico, west to California, together." The offer hung between them, precious and impossible. Together, the word held promises neither dared voice. "Your men need you," she said finally. "That's not an answer." She turned to face him fully. "What are you asking me? Caleb?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I'm asking what you want, Evelyn. Not what's safe or smart or proper. What you want." She thought of the ring in his pocket, of Sister Catherine's knowing smile, of the way her heart raced when he was near. "I want impossible things," she whispered. "So do I." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, finding comfort in his solid presence. But sometimes impossible things happen anyway, even in the desert. They held each other as the fire burned low. 2 outlaws against the world. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new choices, but tonight they had this, stolen moments under endless stars, the promise of something worth fighting for, even if it killed them both. Dawn came like a blessing over the mountains, painting the rocks gold and rose. Evelyn woke in Caleb's arms, their bedrolls pushed together sometime in the night. For a moment, she let herself pretend this was normal, that she could wake like this every morning without fear or consequence. His eyes opened, immediately alert. "We should move soon." The others will be expecting us." But neither of them moved. The morning air was cool, their shared warmth too precious to abandon. She traced a scar on his forearm, feeling him tense beneath her touch. "Evelyn, I know." She pressed her finger to his lips. "Just not yet." He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. The look in his eyes made her breath catch. Desire and regret tangled together. "This isn't fair to you," he said roughly. "You deserve better than a wanted man who can't even promise tomorrow. What if I don't want better? What if I want this?" He rolled them so she was beneath him, his weight a welcome pressure. "You don't know what you're asking. Then show me." The kiss was different from their first. No hesitation, no holding back. His hands tangled in her hair, and she arched against him, every nerve alive. The world narrowed to this, his mouth on hers, the solid heat of his body, the desperate need that had been building since that night in the cave. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Not here," he said hoarsely. "Not in the dirt like, you deserve better. I decide what I deserve." But she understood. Even this, even now, he was trying to protect her honor. They broke camp in charged silence, riding hard toward the hidden valley where the others waited. But as they crested the final ridge, Caleb pulled up sharp. Smoke, too much smoke. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn. The camp was in chaos, supplies scattered, several men down. Tom met them at the perimeter, blood running from a gash on his temple. "Bounty hunters," he said grimly. 6 of them, maybe 7, professional outfit. We drove them off, but casualties? Jake's bad, took one in the chest, and Tom's face darkened. They knew about the woman, called her by name. Said Greeley's upped the bounty. 5,000 now, alive only. 5,000, enough to make even loyal men think twice. "Where's Jake?" Evelyn was already dismounting. "Don't," Caleb started, but she was already pushing past him. Jake lay near the supply wagon, Doc working frantically over him. The wound was bad, too much blood, air bubbling through with each labored breath. "Let me help," she said, dropping to her knees beside them. Doc glanced up, face grim. "Unless you can work miracles, Miss..." "My mother was a nurse before she married. She taught me." Her hands were steady as she took the clean cloth Doc handed her. "We need to seal the wound, stop the air getting in." They worked together, Evelyn drawing on half-remembered lessons, prayers, and sheer determination. Jake was one of the ones who'd been kind to her from the start, who'd taught her to read tracks and start a fire in the wind. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, beating down mercilessly. Men came and went, bringing water, taking away bloody rags. Caleb stood guard, rifle ready, watching the ridges for the hunter's return. Finally, as afternoon shadows grew long, Jake's breathing steadied. The wound was closed. Infection still a risk. But he lived. "You did good," Doc said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Real good." Evelyn stood on shaky legs, suddenly aware of the blood covering her hands and dress. Jake's blood, spilled because of her. She made it 3 steps before her knees gave out. Strong arms caught her. Caleb, always there when she needed him. He held her while she shook, the day's terror finally catching up. "This has to stop," she whispered against his chest. "People are dying because of me. People are dying because Nathan Greeley is a bastard who thinks he owns you." His voice was hard. "Don't you dare take that on yourself." That night, the camp was subdued. They'd won the day, but at cost. And everyone knew the hunters would be back, probably with reinforcements. Caleb called a meeting after the evening meal. "We can't stay here. Too exposed. Too many trails leading in. I'm thinking we head south, maybe hole up in the Sierra Madre for a while." "What about her?" The question came from Ben, one of the newer riders. "No offense, miss, but that bounty's only going up. How long before someone decides?" "Anyone thinking of collecting ends up like Tanner," Caleb said flatly. "That clear enough?" Crystal. But Ben didn't back down. Still doesn't solve the problem. Greeley won't stop. Man like that, his pride won't let him. Evelyn stood before anyone else could speak. He's right. This won't end until Nathan has me back or... She swallowed hard. Or one of us is dead. Evelyn. No. Caleb. Listen. She faced the assembled men. These outlaws who'd become her unlikely family. You've all risked enough for me. I won't have more blood on my hands. She took a breath. I'm going back. The explosion of protests was immediate, but she held up her hand, and surprisingly, they quieted. Not to marry him. She continued. To end this, one way or another. The hell you are. Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. You think I'd let you walk back into that bastard's hands? Let me? She rounded on him. You don't let me do anything. Caleb Rhodes. That's the whole point. My choice, my life, my... He kissed her, right there in front of everyone. Kissed her like a man drowning. When they broke apart, the camp was silent. Your choice, he agreed roughly. But you're not making it alone. We do this. We do it together. Caleb, together. He turned to the men. Anyone wants out, now's the time. No judgment, no hard feelings. But those who stay, we're not just running anymore. We're taking the fight to Greeley. One by one, the men spoke up. Tom first, then Doc, then others. Even Ben nodded grudgingly. They'd ride with Caleb to hell itself if he asked. Then it's settled. Caleb's smile was sharp as a blade. We've been playing defense too long. Time to remind Marshal Greeley why they call this outlaw country. Later, as the camp settled for the night, Evelyn found herself alone with Caleb by the dying fire. The momentous decision made, a strange peace settled over her. You didn't have to do that, she said. Kiss me in front of everyone? Yes, I did. He pulled her close. Been hiding too long, pretending this was temporary. But if we're riding into hell together, I want everyone to know why. And why is that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulling out the simple gold ring Sister Catherine had given him. Because I love you, he said simply. God help me, I love you. Evelyn Harper. And if we're going to die fighting Nathan Greeley, I want to do it as your husband, not just the outlaw who gave you shelter. The ring caught the firelight, gleaming with possibility. Evelyn's heart raced, but her voice was steady. You're proposing? Now? Here? Would you prefer I wait until we're being shot at? Despite everything, his mouth quirked in that half-smile she'd come to love. Might be our only chance. She thought of all the reasons to say no, the danger, the impossibility, the sheer madness of it all. Then she thought of waking in his arms this morning, of the way he'd stood between her and every threat, of the life they might build if they survived this. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes, Caleb Rhodes. I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. It fit perfectly, as if Sister Catherine had known. They were married at dawn by Doc, who'd apparently performed such ceremonies before. The whole camp stood witness, these hard men surprisingly solemn as Evelyn and Caleb spoke simple vows. Till death do us part, she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. And beyond, he added, sealing their union with a kiss that tasted of promise and gunpowder. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert, the camp prepared for war. But for this moment, Evelyn Harper, no, Evelyn Rhodes, stood hand in hand with her husband, ready to face whatever came next, together. The journey back to Redemption Creek took 3 days. 3 days of hard riding through territory that grew more dangerous with each mile. They'd split the group, most of the men circling wide to set up positions around the town, while Caleb and 2 others escorted Evelyn directly. She rode with her head high, no longer the frightened woman who'd fled into the desert months ago. The ring on her finger caught the sunlight, a small defiance against the world that said she belonged to Nathan Greeley. You sure about this? Tom asked for the 100th time as they made camp the final night. No, Evelyn admitted. but certainty's a luxury we can't afford. The plan was simple in concept, dangerous in execution. She would ride into town openly, let herself be taken to Nathan. The public nature of her return would force him to maintain appearances. He couldn't simply shoot her in the street. While he scrambled to reassert control, Caleb's men would be moving into position. "He'll want a public wedding," she said, staring into the campfire. "Quick, before anyone can object. He'll see it as reclaiming his property, proving his power. And that's when we hit them." Caleb confirmed. During the ceremony, when his guard is down, it wasn't much of a plan. Too many variables, too many ways it could go wrong. But it was better than waiting for the next bounty hunter. The next attack. That night. Their last before the storm. Caleb held her close in their bedroll. Neither slept, both memorizing the feel of the other, storing up warmth against the cold to come. "If something happens," she started. "Nothing's going to happen." "Caleb, please. If something happens, promise me you'll run. Don't try to be noble." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Can't promise that, but I can promise that whatever happens, it was worth it, every minute." Dawn came too soon. Evelyn dressed carefully in the best dress from her salvaged belongings, pinning her hair in the Eastern style Nathan preferred. She looked like the schoolteacher again, proper and contained. Only the sun-darkened skin and work-calloused hands betrayed her transformation. She slipped off her wedding ring, hanging it on a leather cord around her neck, hidden beneath her high collar. "Ready?" Caleb asked. "No, but let's do this anyway." They parted ways a mile from town, Caleb and Tom melting into the rocky terrain while Evelyn rode on alone. Her horse's hooves seemed unnaturally loud in the morning stillness. The first person to see her was Mrs. Whitmore, hanging laundry behind her shop. The woman's eyes went wide, the wet sheet dropping from nerveless fingers. "Miss Harper." "Mrs. Whitmore." Evelyn kept her voice steady. "I believe Marshal Greeley has been looking for me." Word spread like wildfire. By the time she reached the main street, half the town had gathered to stare. She saw shock, curiosity, and no small amount of disappointment. The romantic story of the runaway bride was far more interesting than her apparent surrender. Nathan emerged from his office like a man seeing visions. He'd aged in the months of her absence, gray threading through his hair, lines carved deep around his mouth, but his eyes burned with a possessive fury that made her stomach clench. "Evelyn." Her name came out as half growl, half prayer. "My dear, we've been so worried." He reached for her, and it took everything she had not to flinch as his hands closed on her arms. His grip was too tight, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Marshal." She kept her tone neutral, polite. "I apologize for the concern I've caused." His eyes narrowed at her formal address, searching for the trap. But she'd learned to hide her thoughts in the outlaw camp, to show only what she chose. "Where have you been?" The question came out harsh, demanding. "Lost." The lie came smoothly. "The storm scattered my horse. I wandered for days before some Mexican traders found me, took pity. They were kind enough to bring me north when I recovered." "Traders?" His voice dripped skepticism. "Yes, they left me at the edge of town. They were concerned about their welcome here." Let him make of that what he would. The story was thin, but public enough that he couldn't simply dismiss it, not with half the town watching. "Well," he forced his face into something resembling concern. "You're home now. That's all that matters." His grip shifted to her elbow, proprietary and controlling. "Come, you need rest, proper care. We'll have Doc Martens look you over, make sure those traders didn't harm you." She let him guide her down the street, acutely aware of the watching eyes, the whispered speculations. This was the dangerous time, alone with Nathan, before plans could be set in motion. His house was as she remembered, austere and cold despite the desert heat. He shut the door with deliberate finality, the sound like a cell closing. Now, he said, voice dropping to something more dangerous. The truth. Where have you been? Evelyn? I told you. The slap came without warning, snapping her head to the side. Don't lie to me. Traitors didn't put those calluses on your hands, didn't teach you to look me in the eye like an equal. She tasted blood where her teeth had cut her cheek. Does it matter? I'm here now. Yes, you are. He moved closer, backing her against the wall. And you'll stay here. The wedding will be tomorrow. This time, I'll make certain you don't run. Tomorrow? She let calculated surprise show. So soon? I've waited long enough. His hand rose to her throat, not choking but threatening. You've humiliated me, Evelyn, made me look weak. That ends now. Of course, Nathan. She forced herself to remain passive, to play the broken woman he expected. I understand. Suspicion flickered across his face at her easy acquiescence. But his ego won out. Of course she would submit. She was just a woman, after all. And he was the law in Redemption Creek. Good. He stepped back. You'll stay in the back room. Mrs. Davis will attend you, help you, prepare. His smile was cruel. Wouldn't want you getting lost again. The back room was little more than a cell, windows nailed shut, door locking from the outside. Mrs. Davis, the mayor's wife, looked deeply uncomfortable as she brought water and fresh clothing. I'm sorry, the older woman whispered. This isn't right, but what can we do? He's the Marshal. It's all right, Evelyn assured her, already cataloging potential weapons, escape routes. I knew what I was coming back to. That night, she lay on the narrow cot, fingering the hidden ring at her throat. Somewhere out there, Caleb and the others were moving into position. She had to trust the plan, trust them, trust that love could triumph over law. Morning brought a white dress. Not the one from before, but new, more elaborate. Nathan making a statement. She dressed mechanically, letting Mrs. Davis fuss with her hair, apply powder to hide the bruise on her cheek. Beautiful, Mrs. Davis said sadly, like a lamb to slaughter. If only she knew, Evelyn thought, how sharp this lamb's teeth had grown. The church was packed, curiosity bringing out the entire town. Nathan waited at the altar in his finest suit, badge polished to gleaming. His satisfied smile made her skin crawl, but she walked steadily down the aisle, playing her part. Reverend Mills looked uncomfortable, rushing through the opening words. Dearly beloved, we gather here today. Skip the preliminaries, Reverend, Nathan interrupted. Get to the vows. Evelyn felt rather than saw the subtle shift in the congregation. There, Tom in the back row, Jake, pale but upright, near the side door. Others scattered throughout, waiting. Do you? Nathan Greeley. Take this woman. I do. And do you? Evelyn Harper. The church doors burst open. Caleb Rhodes stood silhouetted against the blazing sun, twin revolvers drawn. I object. Chaos erupted. Nathan went for his gun, but Evelyn moved faster, grabbing his wrist, using momentum to send him crashing into the pulpit. Around them, the congregation scrambled for cover as Caleb's men revealed themselves. Nobody move, Caleb commanded. This is between Greeley and me. Nathan struggled to his feet, face purple with rage. You're a dead man. Rhodes. All of you are dead. Maybe, but not today. Caleb moved down the aisle, guns steady. Evelyn, you all right? Never better. She yanked the wedding veil off, letting it fall to the floor. Hello, husband. The word hit Nathan like a physical blow. Husband. That's right, Greeley. Caleb's smile was sharp as winter. You've been chasing another man's wife. How's that sit with your precious law? You're lying. She's mine. I'm no one's. Evelyn stepped forward, pulling the ring from beneath her collar. I married Caleb Rhodes of my own free will, which is more than I would have done for you. Nathan's face contorted with fury. He lunged for her, but Caleb's bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him back. Next one kills you, Caleb said calmly. Around them? The standoff continued. Some townspeople cowered, but others watched with something like satisfaction. Nathan Greeley had ruled through fear for too long. "You can't escape," Nathan gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Every lawman in the territory will hunt you. Every bounty hunter. I'll see you both hang—" "No," a new voice interrupted. "You won't." Judge Harrison stepped from the crowd, several territorial marshals flanking him. "Nathan Greeley, you're under arrest for corruption, abuse of power, and conspiracy to commit murder." Nathan's face went white. "You can't. We've been investigating you for months." The judge continued. "Miss Harper's flight simply accelerated our timeline." He looked at Evelyn with something like respect. "Your mother would be proud. Young woman, her final case, the one you observed, documented Greeley's crimes extensively. We just needed time to verify her claims." Evelyn felt her knees weaken. Her mother's work, completed at last. Caleb's arm came around her, steady and sure. "As for you, Mr. Rhodes," the judge continued, "in light of services rendered and evidence provided, the territory is prepared to offer amnesty for you and your men." The church erupted in voices, shock, protest, relief. But Evelyn heard none of it. She turned in Caleb's arms, seeing her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "It's over," she whispered. "No," he corrected, holstering his guns to hold her properly. "It's just beginning." He kissed her there in the church, in front of God and everyone. Not the desperate kiss of outlaws, but the promise of a future neither had dared dream. Outside, the desert sun blazed eternal, but inside Evelyn Rhodes's heart, something even brighter burned. Hope, love, and the wild freedom of a choice truly made. The morning sun cast long shadows across the small homestead. Painting the adobe walls gold, Evelyn Rhodes stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, watching her husband work. 6 months had passed since that chaos in the church. 6 months of building something new from the ashes of their old lives. Caleb had taken the amnesty, as had most of his men. Some, like Tom and Jake, had stayed close, working the neighboring ranch. Others had drifted west, seeking fresh starts in California or Oregon. But here, in this valley tucked between red rocks and running water, Caleb and Evelyn had made their stand. "You're staring again," he called without turning from the fence he was mending. "Maybe I like what I see." He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, and she was struck again by how different he looked. The hardness hadn't left entirely. It never would. But there was a peace in his eyes now that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Letter came yesterday," she said, holding up the envelope. "From Judge Harrison." Caleb set down his tools, instantly alert. Old habits died hard. "What's he want?" "To offer you a job. Actually, Deputy Marshal for the Southern District." She watched his face carefully. "The pay's good. We could use the money." He crossed to her, taking the letter but not opening it. "What do you think?" "I think you were a good lawman once. You could be again." She touched the scar on his cheek, the one from their flight together. "But only if you want it. We have enough here. The horses, the garden. We're surviving." Surviving. He pulled her close, letter crumpling between them. "That all you want? To survive?" "I want you safe, happy. Everything else is secondary." "Even your school?" She'd been teaching again, riding into the nearest settlement twice a week. The children there were rough, suspicious of outsiders, but slowly warming to her patient instruction. It wasn't the formal schoolhouse of Redemption Creek, but it was hers. "The school matters," she admitted. "But not more than this. Not more than us." He was quiet for a long moment, then set the letter aside, unopened. "Let me think on it. No rush to decide." But the decision was taken from them that very afternoon. They heard the horses before they saw them, too many for a social call, moving too fast for friendly intent. Caleb had his rifle in hand before she could blink, old instincts surging back. "Get inside," he ordered. "Not a chance." She grabbed the shotgun from beside the door. "We faced trouble together, remember?" The riders crested the hill. And Evelyn's heart sank. Not marshals or bounty hunters, but something worse. Will Tanner, accompanied by half a dozen hard-faced men. "Rhodes!" Tanner's voice carried across the valley. "Got business with you." Caleb stepped out, rifle casual but ready. "Thought I made myself clear. Will, you show your face again. You'll kill me. Yeah, I remember." Tanner reined up just outside comfortable shooting range. "But see, things have changed. You've gone respectable. Got yourself a pardon. A pretty wife. A homestead. Got something to lose now. State your business or move on. Simple. There's a job up north. Train carrying Army payroll. Need someone who knows the route, knows the guards." His smile was ugly. "Someone like the famous Caleb Rhodes. I'm out of that life." "Are you?" Tanner leaned forward in his saddle. "Because the way I see it, you owe me. You threw me out with nothing, left me to die in the desert. Only fair you make it right. You brought that on yourself when you tried to sell my wife for bounty money." "Your wife?" Tanner's eyes found Evelyn, and she fought not to shudder at the malice there. "Pretty thing. Be a shame if something happened while you were away working honest. Accidents happen on lonely homesteads." Caleb's rifle shifted slightly. "You threatening her?" "Just observing. World's a dangerous place." Tanner straightened. 3 days. Rhodes. You got 3 days to decide. Help with the job. Or," he shrugged. "Well, let's hope it don't come to that." They wheeled and rode off, dust hanging in the air like a threat. "We could run," Evelyn said quietly. "Pack up. Head for Mexico like we planned." "No." Caleb's jaw was set. "I'm done running. Done letting men like Tanner dictate terms." "Then what?" "Then I take that badge Harrison's offering, and I do this legal." The transformation was swift. Within a day, Caleb had ridden to town and returned with a deputy's star and official warrant powers. Tom and Jake came in from their ranch, along with 2 younger men looking to make names for themselves. "Just like old times," Tom said, checking his weapons. "Except now we're wearing tin." They set a trap, using Evelyn as bait despite Caleb's protests. She continued her routine, riding to the settlement for teaching, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. But now she had shadows, men watching from the hills, ready to intervene. Tanner took the bait on the second day. She was returning from town when they surrounded her. 3 men, faces covered, guns drawn. Her horse spooked, nearly throwing her. "Easy there, schoolmarm," one said. "Just need you to come quiet-like. Give your husband proper motivation." "I don't think so." The ambush was perfectly executed. Caleb and his deputized outlaws emerged from concealment, catching Tanner's men in a crossfire. The would-be kidnappers threw down their weapons without a shot fired. But Tanner himself wasn't among them. "Where is he?" Caleb demanded. One of the men, young and scared, broke quickly. "Gone after the train anyway. Said you'd either join or be too busy mourning to stop him." Caleb looked at Evelyn, torn between duty and protection. "Go," she said firmly. "I'll be fine. Tom can stay with me." "Evelyn, this is who you are. Caleb Rhodes, a man who stands between the innocent and those who'd harm them. So go. Do your job." She kissed him hard. "Just come back to me." The pursuit was brutal, pushing horses and men to their limits. They caught up with Tanner's gang just as they were positioning to hit the train. The ensuing gunfight was fierce but brief. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, facing badges instead of fellow outlaws. Tanner's men surrendered one by one, all except Tanner himself. He made his stand in a box canyon, the same kind of natural fortress that had once sheltered Caleb's own gang. The irony wasn't lost on either man. "Could have been partners. Rhodes!" Tanner shouted from cover. "Could have ruled this territory." "I tried that life," Caleb called back. "It ends one of 2 ways, a bullet or a rope. I chose a third option." "You chose weakness. Let a woman soften you, make you forget who you are." "No, she helped me remember who I wanted to be." The final confrontation was swift. Tanner, desperate and cornered, made a fatal mistake. He broke cover, trying for his horse. Caleb's shot was clean, merciful in its precision, standing over Tanner's body. Caleb felt the last chains of his old life break. He'd killed as a lawman now, not an outlaw. The distinction mattered. He returned home to find Evelyn safe, the homestead peaceful. She ran to him as he dismounted, checking frantically for injuries. "I'm fine," he assured her. "It's done, all of it." That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Evelyn traced patterns on his chest. "So, Deputy Marshal Rhodes has a nice ring to it. Better than Outlaw Rhodes. Different, but good different." She propped herself up on an elbow. "I have some news too. I was going to wait, but—" She took his hand, placed it on her still flat belly. "We're going to need a bigger house." The joy on his face was worth every hardship they'd endured. He pulled her down for a kiss that said everything words couldn't. "A baby," he breathed against her lips. "Our baby. Our future," she corrected. "The one we fought for." Later, she retrieved her journal from its hiding place, adding to the entry she'd been writing, "Love born in darkness." She wrote, "Need not stay there. Like desert flowers that bloom after rain, what seems dead can surprise you with life. Caleb saved me from a cage of society's making. I saved him from one he'd built himself. Together, we saved each other." She set down the pen and returned to bed, where her husband waited. Outside, coyotes called to the moon, wild and free. But inside the small adobe house, two souls who'd found each other against all odds, held tight to their impossible, perfect love. In the morning, there would be work, fences to mend, lessons to teach, laws to enforce. But tonight, there was only this, the peace of chosen love, the promise of new life, and the knowledge that some fires, once lit, burn eternal. The desert had tested them with thirst and bullets, betrayal and flight. But they had emerged not just alive, but transformed. Where once stood a runaway bride and a bitter outlaw, now stood partners, lovers, family. And in the vast wilderness of the American frontier, under stars that had witnessed so much struggle, Evelyn and Caleb Rhodes built their life together. One choice, one day, one fierce love at a time. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West Campfire. Where are you enjoying this story? Let us know in the comments so we can connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel and share your thoughts on Evelyn and Caleb's journey. Until next time, partners, keep that campfire burning and those stories flowing.